Hi, I'm Brandon Sexton. I'm in Dr. Chandley's Human Anatomy class, and I want to do a quick video on one of the study tactics that I used for her class, and it helped me go a long way. In anatomy, you're going to have somewhere around 10,000 terms that you're going to have to remember, and that's going to take a good plan and a good bit of time of studying. So making sure that you have study techniques that work is a really good idea. And the study technique that works best for me, and I think it works best for memorizing, would be spaced repetition. You can go and you can look up the scientific research on this, so there's some good proof this actually does work, and it is useful for placing it into long-term memory versus something like cramming, which is more short-term memory. So the basic idea behind spaced repetition is that you will read over your notes, and you'll come back to it within about 24 hours, and then you'll come back to it in a day or two, and in a few more days, and then maybe like a week or so later. And that's kind of like the spacing intervals that I use and work best for me, and it's going to be a little bit different for everybody depending on what you have going on. I know I had two other hard classes with me this time, so I had a lot of other stuff going on too. But you can kind of play around with it, find what works best for you. And just 4 quick steps on how I utilize spaced repetition. One would be I would read through my notes, and I would have a pretty good idea of what was going on. I wouldn't, remember everything. I would begin to forget it rather quickly. But I would come back to it within 24 hours, and I would try to recall what I'd read earlier. Now, I probably remembered 20, maybe 50% if it was a good day of what I actually read earlier that day, but just trying to make myself recall it, because that's what you're going to have to do on a test. So the more you can recall it, the better. And the next step is I would mix it up. Like I would go for a walk instead of just sitting behind the desk all the time. So I'd go out for a walk, or as I was driving to class or to work, or whatever you're doing. If you're doing some task where you're not really engaged in something else, I would be trying to think about what I'd went over that day. If it was the heart or the lungs or some muscle, I would just try to be thinking about what it was, just get my mind to engage on this. And the next one would be, it really came into play after her first test, and I kind of understood what she was going to test us on. What I would do is, as I was reading through the notes, I would try to generate test questions, is what I thought that she might ask based on what she did in the past. So with that, I would just kind of quiz myself. You could read through it and write it down, what some good test questions might be, or as you're studying through the lab models, like, okay, how could she ask this? And you'll have a really good idea after the first test. And then the 4th step would be the few days before the test to go into real big detail, and that's when I actually crammed. There's just so much stuff to learn, and unless you have nothing else going on, you're not going to be 100% prepared. Now, I don't think that anybody could be if you have nothing else going on. It's just a lot of stuff. So I'd actually cram a few days before a test. And with the spaced repetition, I also use 2 other techniques. The first one would be chunking. So what I would do, say if I was on the anterior forearm, there are 3 compartments, and I would break those compartments up. So I would study the muscles in the superficial, then the intermediate, and then the deep, and I would kind of keep those in that chunk there in the anterior forearm. Then I would chunk that into those 3 layers, and then you would add on, say, the posterior forearm. And doing it like that is going to help you recall it, because it's kind of in like one little file drawer in your brain. So that way it kind of help you to reason out when you're on a test. So, okay, well, we're on posterior forearm, and I studied all this together, and I chunked all this together. And along with the chunking, I would also break things down a lot, because when you first look at, just say, any muscle, there's going to be a name that you probably never heard, an origin, an insertion, an action, a blood supply, and innervation. You're going to have to know that all. So I would first I would learn the name of the muscle, and then I would kind of get a general idea of where it's at. So I would start off with that, and then I would come back in on another pass, and then I would begin to add in the muscle attachments, the origin and insertion, and then I would come back and add the blood supply and innervation of it. So I would kind of break that up into 3 pieces, and maybe 2 or 4 pieces might work good for you, but you don't want to get overwhelmed by it because it's just so much stuff. So just getting a good idea of what it is, and then add as much detail as you have time. You may not have time to add all the detail, but add as much as you can, and don't freak out if you can't get it all. And the other technique that I used is interweaving, and by that I would study anatomy. Say if I was just doing the arm, I would only do that for like 30 minutes to an hour, then I would switch to something else. It might be another subject, so what the other classes that you have, switch over to it, and then come back to anatomy, or go for a walk. But you don't want to sit there for 2, 3, 4 or more hours studying the exact same thing. So you want to break that up. You want to do different things, and your mind is actually working on it and making those connections while you're doing something else. So instead of just trying to drive it all home at once, you want to break that up. And I wrote things down a lot as well, because spelling is part of it. If you misspell something, you're going to miss half of it. So I would write it down, and there's a lot of research that shows that writing it down helps it stick into your mind. So that's what I did mostly for this class, as I focused on the PowerPoints and I broke it down like I just mentioned. So space out your learning, make things into chunk, and interweave it. So don't stick with the same thing for hours on end. Kind of switch things up. If you do that and you put in a little bit of time each day, you'll do all right. You just don't get too overwhelmed. You realize, hey, as long as I can get at least 30 minutes a day, you need to get more than that. But if it's just 30 minutes, that's going to go a long way. So I shot for 2 to 3 hours. Normally I'd try to get 3 hours a day. So you want to get as much time as you can. So go ahead and schedule that and be aware that you're going to need to put that time. But there are just some days where you just can't get that much, but at least go over it real quickly. And if you do that, I think you'll do okay. And there's a book that I'll put down in the notes, and it is A Mind for Numbers, How to Excel at Math and Science by Barbara Oakley, and it goes over these techniques and many more that's going to help you go a long way in anatomy or your other classes like chemistry, physics, or even English. It's just going to give you a lot more techniques and a lot of examples of people who did really well at school. So I would highly recommend you read that book. It helped me so much do well in school. I cannot recommend it enough. But anyway, good luck in this class, and I hope you do well. Thank you.